pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We'll start with 2.02, the approval of tonight's agenda.
I move the board approve the agenda as presented.
Second.
Sandra, when you are ready.
Scott?
Yes.
Andy?
Yes.
Kim Marie?
Yes.
AJ?
Yes.
Drew?
Yes.
Angie?
Yes.
Nick?
Yes.
Motion carries.
And into 2.03, honoring excellence tonight.
Well, tonight is one of those bittersweet evenings, I think, as we've dedicated honoring excellence to a special lady that has announced that she will be retiring at the end of this month after an amazing 40-year run of service in Liberty Public Schools. Mrs. Sandra Cochran currently serves as both administrative assistant to the superintendent and Board of Education secretary. Mr. Bartlow and Dr. Tucker have some special presentations they will do in here in just a moment, but we first wanted to share a special video that we recorded last week. And before we play that, I just wanted to share in my 12 plus years working at the District Administration Center, Ms. Cochran has been very responsive to any request, quick to get back on emails. When I reached out to her 2 weeks ago to do this interview, she was not very responsive. It took a lot of arm twisting to get this video shot, but a great opportunity to reminisce on her time here in Liberty Public Schools. And again, following the video, I'll turn things back over to Dr. Tucker and Mr. Bartlow to conclude honoring excellence. So, Sandra, thank you for your service to Liberty Public Schools.
Someone asked me today if I'm counting down the days. I said, I feel like the days are counting down on me. It's just so hard to believe that it's just a few more days and then I end my career. That's really difficult for me to digest. So I started with the district in 1982 with Don Howerton. Don Howerton was a counselor at Liberty Junior High School, which is now Heritage Middle School. And he was a homeschool coordinator. And so because he worked with special education students, he had one classroom with special education, he was afforded a para in the district. And that's where I started with Liberty Public Schools. So I never even thought I would spend 40 years in a position. I moved from the junior high school to central office, and I think when I can really see the changes is when I started in human resources. So I started in 1990, and that's when Liberty Middle School opened. So the population of our district at that time was maybe 6,000. The student population was pretty small, but then that's when it was exploding. You know, that's when they opened the first middle school. To have been such a part of so many people who entered the district for those 9 years, and then to have seen most of those retire, and for me to be left. But what great relationships. And I think what I have been privileged to is to get to know the people that are the face of the district, but so many only know them as the face of the district. Knowing board members as individuals and knowing their personalities and getting to know them. Our superintendent, getting to know him. You know, a lot of times when you think about the district, you think about the schools and the buildings. It's the people who make the district. My job is not my identity. So I can walk away from my job, but walking away from the people I love and work with so closely, that's going to be the hard part. I would hope that my legacy would be that she cared, that it wasn't just a job, and that the people I met and encountered throughout my job here believed that they were important to me. When I listen to parents on the phone who are frustrated, that I listened. I think we miss in society right now people who listen. So I would hope that people would say, that was someone who cared about people.
It's not our intent to make you cry tonight, by any means. I think I speak for everybody up here. You're going to achieve all of those things and more as you leave. Our lives are stories. Life is about stories, about people and stories, Sandra. And, there's a lot of great ones with you, a part of them, in helping to make people more human. And I know I personally, coming onto the board a couple of years ago, your kindness, your generosity, your time, the effort that you put forth, to your point, not getting to know necessarily us as board members, but us as people. And you recognize and understand that there's so much more behind individuals than just what you see. And I'm so thankful that you've put in the time here with the district in multiple ways, and certainly in the way of continuing to be a board secretary for many years lately, and helping us navigate those waters. I don't think everybody understands what that means, and the challenges that come with that, and making sure that we're all doing the right thing. And your legacy here is unmatched for sure. And I'm grateful. I'm sure everybody else here is grateful as well, and I'm very thankful for the service that you have given. So thank you. And we have a plaque, which doesn't do enough justice, but in honor of your retirement, retired with distinction and appreciation after 40 years of dedicated service to all students, and I would say staff and faculty, who have been a part of Liberty Public Schools throughout these many years. From us at the Board of Education. Thank you.
So there's a part two. And for those that are Liberty Public Schools employees, every year at convocation, we typically honor our employees for 5 years of service, 10 years of service, 20, 30, and beyond. We wanted to ensure that you received this because this one is a special one. It states, Liberty Public Schools gratefully recognizes Sandra Cockrum for 40 years of service on behalf of the Board of Education 2022. You also have some guests here this evening.
I do.
And I want to make sure you have an opportunity to acknowledge and recognize them because it's certainly, while you're in the seat, you're in the role, family is involved as well in supporting you and supporting the work. So we want to turn it over to you to provide an opportunity for you to introduce them as well.
Thank you. So I do have my daughters, their families, and my husband here tonight.
You all want to stand? Thank you all for being here.
Sandra, not to put you on the spot, you said a lot in the video, but anything you want to say?
If I start talking, I'll start crying. But I do. It's been my honor to be associated with Liberty Public Schools, to wear that badge and wear it proudly. Because Liberty Public Schools is a great district, and it is full of phenomenal people. And I just hope that people get to have that same experience because it's been a great one for me. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Tough to follow all that up, but I just wanted to also recognize individuals who have filed to sit in this seat and work with, the future person who may be a part in Sandra's role. But those who have filed for Board of Director position in the April 5th, 2022 election are Karen Rogers, Matthew Samick, Daniel Currents, Kyle Bryant, Jim Bates, and John Rode. And I know I've seen a few of you here. If you guys want to stand, if you're here, feel free to be recognized. And again, thank you all for stepping forward to be a part in service. All right. We're going to move into public comment next. And just as a reminder, thanks for all who have joined here today. Reminding everyone that we still have a mask requirement in the district buildings, including this building here, the District Administration Center. So appreciate you continuing those on as you agreed to do so to come in. We certainly have a long history of welcoming our constituents to come and share concerns and opinions with us through public comment. And while we have diverse opinions within our community, we recognize that there is a certain level of decorum that we'd like to have during our meetings, especially during public comment. So while we don't agree with everything that someone says, potentially, they are here to discuss their specific needs, seeking to have their voice heard. If we do have outbursts that occur to create an atmosphere of hostility, we can certainly restrict or end public comment in order to continue with the business meeting at hand. So please don't make comments or inferences, either positively or negatively, about any specific individuals within the district. If you do have concerns or certainly affirmations you want to make about specific individuals, we take those offline, make sure we can properly address them through those measures. We are not, as a board, using public comment as a time to converse or dialogue. While we don't interact directly during this meeting, know that we are taking notes, and we certainly follow up with those who are looking to have a follow-up either directly after the meeting or during the week. So as speakers approach the podium, just a reminder, people addressing the board asked to not repeat what somebody before has said. You wishing to address any subject concerning Liberty Public Schools and or education, you can do so at the podium. But if you're addressing the board, please keep your remarks concise and to the point. Each speaker is limited to 3 minutes. Person or persons may speak only once at the meeting. Concerns brought forward during public comment certainly may be addressed by the superintendent or appropriate staff members, usually within a week. And we will start tonight with Brooklyn Norris.
Hi. My name is Brooklyn Norris, and I am a junior at Liberty North High School. I was called to the office at Liberty North High School in the middle of my 7th period on December 13th, 2021, and taken into the assistant principal's office. The door was closed, and one of the assistant principals proceeded to explain to me that it was against the school policy to be at school without a mask. He compared it to the dress code policy and talked about the fact that I wasn't wearing a mask, like I had come to school without a shirt on. He told me that I would have to wear a mask at school like I would have to wear a normal piece of clothing. The tone the assistant principal used while saying all of this told me that his purpose was in calling me to the office was to ridicule me for daring to violate a school policy and intimidate me into submission. But why was I called out for not following school policy when at least half, if not the entire population of girls at Liberty North violate the dress code, a school policy, every day by wearing booty shorts and shirts that are both strapless and show their midriffs? Is it because I chose not to follow the crowd? Is the mask policy more important than the dress code policy? Because I was told they are equal. When I was called into the assistant principal's office, I was harassed in several different ways and was discriminated against for the policy. And in addition to this harassment and blatant discrimination, my rights that are guaranteed me in the supreme law of the land, the U.S. Constitution, are being violated because the school district is forcing me to wear a mask at school. My right to life and liberty, which is what this country is founded on, is being taken away. Why is this happening? You say you have the children's best interest at heart, but I don't believe it. The forced masks are taking away my right to breathe and therefore my right to life. The forced masks are taking away my right to choose for myself and therefore my right to liberty. And everyone I have talked to about this has been repeating the same thing over and over. They're saying that it's the school policy, but they're just using it as a talking point and saying it and saying the same thing repeatedly in several different ways. They're not listening to me and the points I'm making. I know this because they keep saying I don't have an answer for that and circling back to the point they made before. And this is after I proved that they couldn't make me wear a mask based on it being a school policy because they don't enforce the policies that are of equal importance. And if they do have an answer for me, they don't actually address the point I made. The entire staff at Liberty North High is not listening to anything that I'm saying and just trying to shut me up so they can move on with their lives. I'm not being heard. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Norris. Next, Scott Sifton.
Thank you. My name is Scott Sifton, and I grew up in Gladstone. I'm a North Kansas City High grad, but we actually walked for graduation here at William Jewell. I represented South St. Louis County in the Missouri Senate for 8 years, and before that, for 9 years, I sat where you sit on the Board of Education for the Afton District, served 2 terms as board president, and as those who have served know, serving on a school board can be difficult in even the best of times. And the last 2 years have certainly been more challenging than just about anything we've ever faced in public education. We never dealt with anything even remotely like this pandemic in my time on the school board. And I cannot begin to imagine everything that you all, teachers, staff, and parents in the district have had to deal with during this terrible pandemic. You on the board have had to make tough calls in the name of doing what you believe is best for kids. And at the end of the day, that's what should guide every board in its deliberations, is what's best for kids. You've done that, and now you've been sued for it. Missouri Attorney General Eric Schmidt is simply wrong on the policy and on the law. Mask policy should be, and as a matter of law, is a matter of local control in Missouri. But this is about more than just masks. This is about the rising tide of extremist intervention in our local schools, the kind that pulls Toni Morrison's very first novel off of the school library shelf right before the beginning of Black History Month. That happened here in Missouri just a couple weeks ago. The kind that pushes for Don't Say Gay legislation, the kind that pushes to erase painful parts of our history. Last January 6th, we saw an attempt to take over our national capital. Today, those same forces led by Steve Bannon are working to gain control of our school buildings. And so for those who support local control, I would just encourage you to study up, do your research, and make sure your voice is heard on April 5th. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sifton. Up next, Matt Samick.
Good evening. I have a short statement. I would just like to say that I acknowledge that the LPS board has a wide array of issues that they are addressing that impact our students, and I understand the need to update the district's return to learn plan under these evolving circumstances. Public safety and keeping our schools open are primary concerns right now, and I encourage the LPS community to do what they can to care for each other and work to keep our kids and our staff healthy, our schools operational, and our students learning. I also encourage the board to endorse the recommendation made by the review committee regarding library materials. Our community of parents and educators has made a recommendation, and I am inclined to support them and would encourage the board to do the same. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Samick. Adam Van Meter. Pass. Okay. Kathy Waller.
I know we were asked to not repeat things, but I did want to say that I want to thank the members of the board for serving in this capacity. And I understand it's often a very difficult position to hold. However, it is also one that each of you wanted. You represent all of the district's residents, not simply those most vocal, who are in your ears and in your faces 24/7. Those who often completely ignore scientific facts in favor of their own very loud personal opinions. Often they seem to outnumber the rest of us, but they do not. I realize this is not a question and answer period, and I understand why the board is instructed not to respond to patrons' concerns in this format due to certain legalities regarding things like the agenda and sunshine laws. Therefore, I will be submitting my question to you via email as instructed by the superintendent's office, and I would like to go on record in saying I hope you will respectfully give me the courtesy of a reply. My question is simple. Please direct me to the exact, proven, scientific, medical studies you have used to continue the mask mandates in our schools. It is my understanding, having exhaustingly researched this, there is not one study proving that these masks are beneficial to our little children or our older children, while there are hundreds, if not thousands, of facts proving just the opposite. I am not interested in your opinions about this. I would simply like to see the valid research that you have based your decisions on. I also do not need an explanation about the overlapping jurisdictions in our district. We are all quite aware of this, and sometimes it's used to pass the buck. The real issue is not that we have buildings in Kansas City and therefore all Liberty schools must do what Quentin Lucas and his council want, regardless of what he does in his personal life by ignoring his own mandates. But rather, why are our Kansas City schools not being forced to follow what Liberty wants? Furthermore, how can we defend this mandate over our children, which the state of Missouri has, and I will correct the gentleman before me, declared illegal? How can we justify putting our citizens and our district funds at risk by openly defying the Attorney General of Missouri? And while I know I cannot receive an answer from you at this time, there is certainly no rule prohibiting me from asking this question to those behind me. How many of you are aware that the state of Missouri has already actually begun formal legal proceedings against our current school board due to its failure to halt the mask mandate, which is illegal? This is not a rumor. It is not a threat. It is not simply my opinion. It is not what I think should or will be done. Formal proceedings have already begun against LPS 53. This is a fact which I discussed with the Attorney General's office today, and which you may confirm by going to the Attorney General's website. On January 20th, Attorney General Eric Schmidt filed suit against another 36 school districts to halt the mask mandates, including Liberty. I will quote him.
Thank you, Ms.
as-
Waller. That's
yes.
time. Appreciate it.
Well, I have about 15 more seconds.
Sorry.
Can I please
No,
finish?
thank you.
Well, someone just said they would give me their time.
No.
Well,
We
it's
let you.
Hi, my name is Lucia Norris, and I just want to finish the end of what she had to say because it was very important to me. She says, quote, "As we have made clear from the beginning, the power to make health decisions for their children should be in the hands of parents, not bureaucrats. Masking children all day in school is ineffective, and these endless pandemic restrictions lead to lasting negative psychological impacts on children and teens. This is a fight worth fighting, and I'm not going to back down." End quote. Okay, so I am also here as a mother. I am here with 2 children in your school district. My other 5 children I pulled out because they're elementary and I can't handle them wearing a mask all day long. I'm here to express to you my grave concerns regarding the compulsory use of face masks in your schools. It has come to my attention that there are widely known hazards, health risks, and dangers associated with the use of face masks, which can result in both physical and psychological harm to the user. It is reasonable to expect that you have considered such issues carefully and familiarize yourself with the available evidence prior to making a decision to compel pupils in your care to wear masks. However, in case you may not have done so to date, I wish to draw these issues to your attention, and I call upon you to take immediate and remedial action. Please be advised, I am also of the view that compelling my children to wear a face mask is in direct violation of their rights to bodily integrity and personal autonomy, and thus constitutes an abuse. For the avoidance of any doubt, I object to my child being subjected to such abuse and call for an end of mask mandates. Masks do have specific uses, but masks are not for healthy children in everyday life, and anyone who tells you that they are an absolute necessity almost 2 years into this pandemic
Anyone that says that children need to wear them all the time in everyday public settings is either grossly informed or lying. There's scientific and medical data. I have here for you to view abundant evidence demonstrating the health risks associated with face masks. In light of the available scientific and medical data, it is evident that face masks constitute a hazard and pose a risk and danger to the health and well-being of your pupils, including my child. There is a duty of care. I would respectfully draw your attention to the legal duties under law owed to my child whilst on your premises and in your care. Duties also arise in the context of the school and pupil relationship, and out of an assumption of responsibility based on knowledge of potential dangers and risks or hazards in the school environment, such as those highlighted above. I would respectfully point out that the consequences of ignoring this scientific and medical data and continuing to implement a compulsory mask policy would constitute a negligence of your duty of care and has the potential to cause harm or injury to my child. I would therefore call upon you to take notice of this seriously and afford it the attention that it deserves. Thank you.
All right, moving into consent agenda. As a reminder, our adopted rules of parliamentary procedure, Robert's Rules, provide for a consent agenda, which lists several items for approval of the board by a single motion. Documentation concerning these items has been provided to all board members and the public in advance to assure an extensive and thorough review. Items may be removed from the consent agenda at the request of any board member.
I move the board approve consent agenda items 3.01 to 3.07.
Second.
Sandra, when you're ready.
Scott?
Yes.
Andy?
Yes.
Kim Marie?
Yes.
AJ?
Yes.
Drew?
Yes.
Angie?
Yes.
Nick?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. Into 4.01, reports from administration, innovation and learning.
First off, we will welcome Dr. Westfall to the podium to provide an update from the Innovation and Learning Department.
Good evening. Thank you for the opportunity to share our information tonight. We just wanted to share, bring a couple things forward from our report, but share about our Panorama Social Emotional Learning Survey that actually started this past Monday and will be available until February 25th for students, teachers, and for the first time both our classified and our certified staff. Students in grades 3 through 12 will participate in the survey, which would take about 20 to 25 minutes to finish online and will be probably most likely completed in class. As in years past, our district goal is to have 95% participation in the survey rate for both our teachers and our staff. Our students. Second, I just wanted to share that we are going to include this time a session for our operations and systems staff on how to look at the data, since this is a new group that we're adding to the survey. And so they'll meet on March 10th and look at the survey questions, interpret the data, and then be able to talk through the platform and all the systems information that they're given. Also wanted to share this Friday, February 18th, crossing our fingers, that it is our District Professional Development Day. We will include the morning for the buildings to work on visible learning plans. And then the afternoon, the teachers will have time for collaboration, much like they do on Wednesdays for PLCs, and then additional work time. We also have special plans this Friday for our first ever Professional Development Day for our paraprofessionals. So we do want to thank Team Liberty for building that into our calendar for them this year. So they received an email this week just to look at the professional development that's aligned to their job-specific roles. And last but not least, we are very excited to announce on behalf of Liberty North High School that the Greater Kansas City School Counselor Association has named Mrs. Jill Brock the Secondary Counselor of the Year and Dr. Precious Kurt as the Supervisor of the Year. So that's a great way to end this announcement tonight, and if you have any questions.
Any questions of Dr. Westfall or Dr. Moore? Okay. Thank you. Next up then, item 4.02 is our equity report, and we'll welcome our Chief Equity Officer to the podium, Dr. Andrea Dixon-Seahorn.
Good evening, Board of Directors. So good to be here with you on this evening to just share a few updates on behalf of the Office of Equity. I do have several items listed in the report. I'm not going to go through all of them, but I do have something that's kind of like a tag team with what Dr. Westfall just shared. and that is around our professional learning for our certified and classified staff members, support staff here in LPS. And that is around belonging to a culture of dignity. So we do now have our finalized makeup dates from that original virtual launch that we did back in August. And this is a way to make sure that we include all of our team members across the organization. So on that same Friday that Dr. Westphal mentioned, Friday, February the 18th, we will have an opportunity for paraprofessionals and other, particularly on the certified side of the organization, on Friday morning to participate in a makeup session with Mr. John Crownapple, author of Belonging to a Culture of Dignity. We also will have a final follow-up session with him for particularly our classified staff members, and that date is February the 22nd. I did have an opportunity today to meet with the operations team, those various directors of departments, to share with them that information so that they can convene as many of their team members who did not get to participate early in the school year as part of our PD work for our organization. Another thing that I wanted to just kind of bring your attention to, and I'm going to mention someone who's just been mentioned just a moment ago, and that is Dr. Precious Kirk and her team, the Diversity Festival Planning Team. As you know, this was the second year where we just made a pivot due to the pandemic, where the Diversity Festival was held in a virtual format. Last year, as you recall, it was a week-long event in a virtual space. This year, just being mindful of everyone's time and the constraints that we're all under, they condensed it miraculously to a one-day convening. What I did note, as I've shared in the report, is that even though the event was held on that Monday, January the 31st, as a one-day event, you'll notice that people still throughout the week decided to access the link, perhaps as part of just classroom conversations or just personal interest and personal growth opportunities. So we did have a total of, as you can see on that, for that week, 643 views, but I even inquired as of today with Josh Erhardt, who's also on the team. We had 748 views even as you look at the total as of date. So I think that that's pretty significant for that to have been held as a one-day event. So I do want to salute those team members. I've already mentioned Dr. Precious Kirk, Josh Erhardt, Emily Schmidt, Krista Peck, and Jill Rock, who we just mentioned. So amazing team, and wanted to give them kudos for their hard behind-the-scenes work in this endeavor. So those are the highlights that I wanted to share with you. If there are any questions, I'll entertain them at this time.
Dr. Dixon Seahorn, you have a piece in here about your Belonging Lunch and Learn sessions. How are the students being chosen who will participate in that?
I'm glad you asked that question. So what we're going to do is look at our panorama data and let the data be our guide. So we want a nice mix of students that have expressed high levels of sense of belonging, more moderate levels, and lower levels of sense of belonging. And to be able to have kind of a mixed bag in terms of students that are convened together and be able to really hear from the mouth of babes, I call it that kind of data, where they are sharing with us what their experiences are so we can better understand what it means to belong through the lens of a student. And then we'll be able to use that information to circle back with school leadership and think about what are those strategies we need to be putting into place next year onward to make our schools settings where students feel included and feel like they belong, regardless of who they are, where they come from, how they show up in school.
So will those be at building levels or at a district level where they'll meet together?
We are going to go to buildings. When we did our follow-up to panorama data from the DEI survey last year, we actually went to designated schools. So we're trying to do at the middle school level the two schools that we didn't go to for this school year. We'll still go back to both high schools as well as Liberty Academy. We decided as a team to focus on secondary schools because that is where our data shows us that we have across the system at the secondary level, lower levels based on student responses to the survey of a sense of belonging. So we want to really address it head on and figure out what is it and what's that it factor there and figure out what we need to do better as adults to help students have a stronger sense of belonging.
Thank you.
Yes.
Any other questions? Thank you, Dr.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Next then is our finance report, item 4.03, and we'll turn it over to Ms. Cindy Sullivan.
Good evening. In addition to the report that I provided for you in board docs, I wanted to share a couple of other things. As you know, budget season has begun, where we are working in two worlds right now. I've had the pleasure to meet with about half of the budget managers so far, and it's been great to get out and go see their world and talk with them about what's going well and what they're needing for next year and get that going. And I will meet with the other half of them in the next week and a half. So good things happening there. I wanted to let you know that the collection of tax revenue is currently at 96%. This time last year we were at 99%. So I did call the county collector today, just wondering if overall they're thinking that collections are slow, and they did verify that they were of the same opinion that collections were a little slower this year than the past. They did also indicate that they will be sending out delinquent notices in the next couple of weeks, so hopefully we'll see an uptick in that percentage of collection. As you know, last year we collected 100% of our revenues, so it's a little concerning that we're a little slow, and I'm sure that's fallout from the pandemic, so we'll keep an eye on that and keep in touch with the county as far as what to expect there. We are also monitoring House Bill 3014, which is the supplemental appropriations bill, which I've spoken to you about before, which includes the ESSER 3 funds. And that bill needs to be passed by March 24th in order for Missouri to get ESSER 3 funds. It's starting to move, albeit slowly, but we're still hopeful that that will be pushed through on time so that we can get our allocation of ESSER 3 funds. The AFC, Audit Finance Committee, did meet last night, and we had the pleasure of having Mr. Anderson present to them. They had requested an update on the facilities master plan, so he graciously came and spoke with them, and they are very appreciative of that, so thank you, Steve. And had their meeting and did not have anything to present to you tonight or questions for you tonight, so they will meet again in May. They will review the financial data online next month. And finally, next month we do start our budget presentations, and I will have a brief presentation with information about preliminary revenues and where we think we're going for the next year. So then we'll follow that up in April with expenditures and a preliminary budget in May with final approval in June. And that's what I have for you tonight, other than if you have questions for me.
So, heaven forbid, ESSER 3 doesn't get passed. What implication is that for us?
Well, we have, because we had to have our plan in place and approved by the state in August, we've already started to work that plan because it involves support of students with learning loss and COVID needs. So we will continue to work that plan and find it within our budget to make do.
Yep. Okay. Any other questions? Thank you, Sullivan.
Thank you. 4.04, then our operations report. Mr. Anderson.
Thank you. Just a couple items to share tonight. First of all, the capital plan process. Been trying to keep you all updated on that over time. We won't have a fine-tuned plan to present probably until next month, but because we have a pretty good idea on some of the major projects that are going through the bidding process, I just wanted to highlight those really quick. At Alexander Donovan, we're looking at library renovations and playground renovations with some ADA accessibility improvements. Manor Hill and Lewis and Clark will see some improvements to the nurse's office and ADA improvements as well. Liberty North High School, the TLC program is expanding there, and so we're going to make some accommodations for that. HVAC improvements and enhancements at this building and support services. Lillian Schumacher has cable and fiber work through the tech department. And then we're also doing several fleet upgrades, both the yellow fleet and the white fleet. So that's just to kind of let you know that. Again, we'll have more information on that probably next month. That kind of puts the whole totality of the plan together for you. And then second, just to hit on the facility master plan process that Ms. Sullivan referenced. So we'll be sending you all kind of an update and overview of what's coming next. In the next few meetings, we'll have our architect here as well to kind of keep presenting to you kind of updates as we go. I did want to highlight that we've identified a date in March 8th, where we're going to have an AM and PM session for community engagement. We'll invite the community in to kind of see the first take at some of the projects that have been identified as part of that process. In addition to that, there will be a community survey that goes out shortly before spring break. And that's, as we've done in the past, where we engage the community overall just in terms of their position, opinions on the district as a whole, but also some of the projects that are being considered. And then right now, anticipating that on March 22nd, architect would be in front of you all to present kind of that full plan as it's taking form at that point. And with that, I'd be happy to take any questions.
Oh, Mr. Anderson, I like the food supply chain question.
Yes.
How we doing? Everything looking okay?
We're doing quite well.
Okay.
I think our nutrition services department and this new one have really gotten on top of that. We've procured enough supplies and have sufficient temporary storage lined up, so we feel like we're in good shape, certainly to finish out the year.
And then anything operations-wise with snow removal, salting, everything seems to have gone well. Anything that the team needs?
Nope, they're always well prepared. I think in part the guys get a little ramped up for when it's here and they're up and running at 1:30 in the morning for those events, and so I know they're keeping a close eye on tomorrow night and will be out in force if need be.
Great, thank you. Any other questions? All right, thank you.
Next item then is 4.05, our Human Resources Report, and we will turn that one over to Dr. Vogelaar.
Thank you for the opportunity to share what's been happening in the Human Resources Department with the district. So strategically speaking, three things I want to highlight. The Employee Wellness Program, as you know, strategically the shift in our Employee Assistance Program ties in with our self-care and work-life balance initiatives that we have. Our wellness coordinator has been holding voluntary meetings for staff, both face-to-face and virtually, to educate them about the benefits of the new EAP plan, since we shifted from one that we've used for several years. There's a lot of education that needs to take place. These benefits are for all employees, not just members of our health insurance, but all employees and their dependents. And the benefits include counseling sessions, free counseling sessions, unlimited texting with the counselor through TalkSpace, on-demand self-help app called Sanvello, and the work-life balance initiatives made available through Optum. So we're excited about that rollout and the feedback that we'll receive from employees as they take advantage of those services. Regarding our Grow Your Own program, both teachers and administrators, we're in the process of evaluating applications for the Grow Your Own Teacher program. Good news is that the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education did afford a grant specifically for Grow Your Own, and we were notified, the deadline was the end of January. We were notified that our grant was accepted, and that will provide $10,000 available to expand the Grow Your Own Teachers program. And we're going to expand it by moving it into a hard-to-fill area. So any student that is interested in moving into education as a career and they're choosing a content area and a hard-to-fill area, they would be eligible to apply for that. And then that will also be afforded to our staff. So many paraprofessionals want to become special education teachers. That's a hard-to-fill area, and so that grant opportunity would be available for them as well. So we're going to start marketing that out to current students and to our support staff that want to turn that corner professionally and move into the classroom in those hard-to-fill areas. So more to come on that, but we're excited about that. And then a special thanks to our leaders who have participated in the Grow Your Own Administrators Program. Leadership Academy met in January. We're going to meet again in just a couple of days. In the January session, our Chief Equity Officer, Dr. Dixon Sehorn, met on the topic and helped our participants explore the differences that can be made by an educational leader who creates a school culture where everyone belongs. It was a good topic, a timely topic, and spurred on a lot of good conversation among our participants. In a couple of days, we'll be meeting again. The topic there is on changing perspectives, kind of moving the emerging leader from a singular view to a systems view. And so thank you to Dr. Moore, Dr. Westfall, and then Ridgeview Principal, Dr. Shannon, who will be our guest speakers to talk on that transformational process. So as far as department updates, I just want to highlight a couple of things. Specifically, 31 postings for positions on the certificated side. We have 710 applications that have come in since the beginning of the year. 454 of those are for those certificated openings, those 31 certificated openings. So we're well into the launch of our hiring season, our typical hiring season as a district. There's other things in the report. I'll be glad to talk on any of those if you have questions for me, but that is the report for Human Resources.
Questions of Dr. Vogelar this evening?
Is the grant a year-long term?
It's a 3-year grant. The
Okay.
Department of Elementary and Secondary Education is funding that for 3 years. Now it's $10,000 total over that 3-year.
Okay. And then is it can you reapply?
We don't know yet. So right now it's a fixed 3-year term on that.
Excellent. That's
Yeah.
a nice chunk of change.
Yeah, there's also a retention grant that's actually significantly more, almost $500,000 for the district, and we're applying that to lead team work, people who want to be teacher leaders but stay in the classroom. It's a retention grant that DESE is offering as well.
So have we applied for that?
We have, and we've also been approved for that. So that will.
Did I miss that?
Well, that is in the beginning workings. We haven't started the marketing for that. This is an existing program, and so that's why this is an add-on.
That's amazing.
Program. So we're going to build a program, and more to come on this, for a teacher ambassador program. That's classroom teachers who want to ambassador the profession to students that would become future educators. And then there's also a lead lab initiative that will be launched that will focus on teachers who want to become teacher leaders in their classroom and in their profession. So a lot to do with instructional coaching, type leadership within their content areas for other teachers, mentor teachers, etc. But that money is to incentivize retention of staff in the classroom.
Thank you. That's exciting.
So that's a sneak peek on that.
Thank you. I like sneak peeks.
Okay.
Dr. Vogelar, the 31 certificated openings that we have right now, and I'm sorry to put you on the spot, approximately how does that compare to years in the past at this time in the hiring season?
So right now, I would say it's on par with. We did have greater participation in our ENIT program, so it does look like a lot more resignations than typical, but this is about on pace. Now, typically at the end of the hiring season, we tend to have around 80 to 90 certificated positions that are filled. That's a combination of turnover as well as newly created positions. I expect we'll likely be a little higher than that, but right now 31 is pretty much on par.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions for Dr. Vogelar?
We can let him off the hot seat.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And into 4.06, the superintendent's report.
Last but not least, a couple items I wanted to draw your attention to that I shared. One was the opportunity we had a while back, just a week or so ago, to share some of the work of the district around our Vivid Vision, our graduate profile, strategic plan, and real-world learning opportunities at the elementary, middle, and high school level with the Northland Education and Business Alliance, or the acronym NEBA. They've been an instrumental group across the Northland in bringing business and education together as far as opportunities for students, for young people, including the inception of Northland CAPS several years ago, but then also just continuing to advance those partnerships. Second item I wanted to share was something that I've communicated with you previously, and that is the formation of a success-ready student work group through the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education, really focused in on two parts, and that is exploring competency-based learning as well as innovative assessment practices to then inform the next iteration of the Missouri School Improvement Program. As you've followed along over the years, we've done some of this work in a variety of settings through the Show Me Task Force, as well as the Missouri Assessment Program and that consortium, but now it's kind of found its way into the department level. And so the intent is, at the conclusion of this work this spring, believe that will culminate in a presentation of a framework to the State Board of Education and the Commissioner about possibilities of exploring competency-based learning and innovative assessment practices across the state of Missouri. A couple of other caveats around that work group is we are invited to present some of the work that we're doing in our district in the early part of March, so we'll look forward to putting a team together to do that, as well as a couple of participants. We have a student representative as well as an instructional coach that is part of that work group. So we'll report out periodically the process and progress of that particular work group at the state level. Also want to shout out and provide a tremendous amount of thanks to all of our departments our teachers, our staff, administrators, everyone in between over the course of the last month and a half, really, as you've watched other districts that have navigated staffing challenges, case rates, as well as attendance rates, some resulting in closures for a temporary period. It was truly an all hands on deck over the course of the last several weeks, trying to remain open and have our classrooms filled with substitute teachers and support, and appreciate several of our administrators going over and substituting in classrooms, as well as a lot of our community parents stepping up in an effort to substitute as well. So hopefully we're beyond that piece as far as that particular challenge. The last thing I just wanted to echo was what Mr. Anderson shared as far as the opportunity to engage further with our community around our facilities master planning process, with some meetings coming up in March in participation with our community. As far as the board's concerned, subsequent study sessions and board meetings will be used to continue to refine and prioritize the work in and around our facilities needs and improvements as we consider a future bond issue. With that said, would certainly open it up for any questions the board may have of me this evening.
Anything in particular in the Success Ready Students work group that you all are going to be specifically focusing on?
Two pieces, really. That one is a competency-based framework, knowing that every district is in different places, that it looks different at the elementary and the middle level and the high school level. How does it fold into some of the real-world learning opportunities that are afforded? Several districts are working on that, not just in our region, but across the state. The innovative assessment practices really has everything to do with moving from a traditional end-of-year assessment, which is what we've been used to. As you know, from the 3rd grade through 8th grade level, it's traditionally been the end of course or end of year math assessments. By the time you get into high school, you end up pivoting to end of course exams. Those metrics are valuable, but they're probably not as valuable as a system that assesses the growth of a student from August to May, with periodic updates to teachers as well as to families in real time, so that they can see where their students are at. More importantly, how they're growing and progressing over the course of the year. The advantage of that type of a system as compared to an end-of-year system, like we currently have, is really the teacher's ability to see in real time where that student's at across different content areas, but then also tailor and adjust their instruction to be able to meet the individual student where they are at. That's that ability to differentiate and apply what you need, and tailor that experience or personalize that experience. So we hope to be able to make some strides there. This has been an ongoing conversation for at least the last 12 years that I've been part of. And so if you've been around that long, you can connect the dots to the progression of the work. Sometimes it advances, sometimes it slows down. Nonetheless, we are where we're at with this work group. So that part's pretty exciting.
Any other questions for Dr. Tucker? All right. Moving into unfinished business, 5.01, library material reconsideration.
We do have 2 items under unfinished business. This first item, I want to thank Dr. Westfall, who's here this evening, and Andrea Sumi, our Director of Library Media Services, for them presenting at our study session and walking us through a couple of key items. If you'll recall, at the study session, that time was used really to focus in on a couple of key pieces. The first category was that library media process, and a couple of processes as it relates to the front end of how we go about selecting materials at the elementary, the middle, and the high school level, and the process in which we navigate material selection. The second piece to that part was really the board policy and process for reconsideration, of which we know any member of the community can request that a book be reviewed. And we pull together a committee. That committee deliberates, brings their findings to the Board of Education. That parent can certainly appeal the committee's decision, which is what brings us to this particular item this evening. But I want to thank them for walking us through that process. As we've talked with other school districts, and you've seen similar headlines from a variety of districts in Missouri and across the nation, there are some districts that are at a point of reflecting and saying, well, we don't have a process, we need to explore and put something in place. Others that may have a similar process to us, or some that have one that's entirely different. And so we feel fortunate that we not only have the policies, we have the process in place as well. The second piece that was highlighted by Dr. Westfall was really a similar selection process, but that's really related to curriculum materials and resources. And she was able to walk through a couple of key pieces, the structure that we utilize of that being teacher selection committees, in addition, tying those resources back to learning expectations as well as Missouri learning standards and the importance of that piece. And the third element that she spoke to was really the ability for parents to have alternative options in and around an objection that they may have and their ability to be able to request and ask for alternative reading materials. Throughout this conversation, one of the things that we want to ensure we communicate out to our parents and families is the ability for parents to be able to put some structure or safeguards, parameters in place, or filters, for lack of a better word, as it relates to their ability to identify texts or titles in the library department that they would rather not their child to have access to. That process has been in place, but we feel like it's of value to be able to ensure that we're communicating it, posting that publicly on our library resources and our library web pages, and I know our team has been working on that particular piece. The second part that we wanted to share with you and provide you opportunity to be able to deliberate about is the request for appeal that was submitted to the Board of Education. I appreciate your due diligence in taking a look at the text in question, but then also navigating this over the course of the last couple of months, and that brings us to this evening's conversation. So we'll turn it back over to you, Mr. Bartlow.
Yeah. So again, as Dr. Tucker noted, you all have had the text, time to review it. You've given commentary, certainly a readout of how the process unfolded and how it all came together. So we'll open it up for discussion, conversation on the appeal.
Well, I get to go first again, I guess, so kick us off. As I read through this, I was fully expecting to come back with a kind of a, are you out of your mind type statement around, are we going to allow this in the libraries? What I found this to be was really a heart-wrenching account of this young man's life and what he went through and his description of it, etc. So I want to approach this from two different things. One is around the process itself, and I don't know how much we want to get into that. Because I think, and if everybody kind of nods along with this, and I'll just move on, but Dr. Tucker mentioned that we pulled together a committee of people. I don't know who those people are. It wasn't a board-appointed committee. I don't know. For all I know, it was 15 people that all personally knew the author. I mean, I don't think it was, but there's no assurances that the committee was of diverse thought of any kind. And I'm told, and somebody can correct me if I'm wrong, I'm told that there really wasn't any discussion or much discussion in this committee, and only one question was asked in the entire time before they took the vote to say 15-0 they approve of this being in the library. So I would expect at a minimum, if nothing else, that the committees that are put together for this kind of things at least work through it and we at least hear about kind of what they wrestled with and what they thought. So that's the piece I have a problem with on the process side. On the book side, I read an article, I wrote a review of this book, and the guy said that it's porn is about whether or not they're intending to be erotic. And I don't know that this guy was doing that. But I also believe this is not, and I think we all agree with this is not suitable for some age kids. This book is not K through 5 libraries. Is that correct?
It's not in them.
It's only in high school, right?
Only in high school.
It's not in the middle school libraries. It's in the high school library. My concern is that if the text of this book was made into a screenplay, word for word, it'd be an R-rated movie, and a strong R-rated movie. Now, I'm not saying, so I'm concerned that, I'm not saying, I don't think this should be banned. It's available at the public library. I think that's where it belongs. People have said, I can find worse on the internet. Well, I'm not responsible for managing access to the internet with, again, people in their own lives. But when we've got 14, 15, 16-year-old kids in a building with 17 and 18-year-old kids, I'm concerned that we're just, due to just expediency and ease of decision, we're just saying, well, everybody in that building gets access to whatever. And I think we should think through a little bit more about exactly who should have access to this. I am not for banning this. I am simply for maybe treating it more like an R-rated movie and not keep the onus on parents to have to write a letter to say, I don't want my kids to have access to this. We should be the protector of that. We should be in front of that for parents in our community. If a parent of a 14-year-old wants them to have access to the adult library, the R-rated movie, whatever, then so be it. But it seems to me that our society has kind of established 18 years old as an adult for a lot of things, that you can't get into an R-rated movie. Of course you can if you go to the local theater and sneak in or whatever. I don't want it banned. I think there is value here, but I don't think there's value here to exposing it to freshmen and sophomore at a minimum.
The one piece I'll address, I understand your points, Scott, on the committee process, but that's the committee process spelled out in the board policy, right? So that's, while the board didn't pick the members of those committees, we did approve. I'm not saying this board, but the Board of Education at some point in time approved this policy to set forth that process for how we will have materials challenged.
Agreed.
And so, you know, my thing is I have comfort in the fact that we have a selection process with our librarians and our staff that a lot of other districts don't have. And so we've got a vetting process on the front end. And then we have a process on this end to go through and look and have a committee appointed. And it spells out that the committee is going to be placed together with lay citizens, professional educators, and chaired by the Assistant Superintendent for Instruction. So there are parameters on who's going to be on that committee. And so that's one piece I wanted to address, that this is part of board policy. This is a policy that the board approved, and that policy, to my knowledge, has been followed to this point.
Okay, the committee, but saying that there's parameters around the committee because it says in there that it's members of the community. That's a pretty broad, and I agree with you. I think we're following our policy. I'm not suggesting we're not following the policy. My question is, we talked about, I appreciate the people who spoke earlier, and a couple of them mentioned local control on whether it's masks or books or training of staff or whatever it is. We can't do everything on our own, and we do count on other groups that we contract out to be experts in the field. And there's an organization that vets these books for us before they even come here, correct?
There are several on the selection process
Right.
That we reference and we refer to.
I'm simply
as part of the
suggesting,
library.
every once in a while, is there one that slips past the goalie? And it's okay for us at the local level to actually make a local decision without saying, well, they said it was okay, so it must be okay. We all read it. I don't, my question for the group is, if it was a script, what would the movie be rated? And how is that different?
But if I could ask you this, how many books are currently in our library that are considered par for the course, that when they have been turned into movies, are rated, are R-rated? You could probably pull you can ask any kid about Stephen King, and how many of them have read a Stephen King novel, and how many of the Stephen King novels are rated R. So to say that, I too read the book, as you did. It is, there are uncomfortable parts in there. I will not disagree with that at all. However, just because something is uncomfortable doesn't mean it's not important to someone to know. From the outset of the book, from the very first pages, the author explains that this is a memoir. This is what he went through as an African American, LGBTQ, and add the letters that are appropriate there. So from the outset, you should be aware that these are the pieces of information that are going to be relayed within the storytelling of that. And throughout, he goes back and forth, and he talks about his questions of whether I should put this in writing, whether I should talk about this, whether I should be doing this to people, whether they're alive, and several of them, have passed during the writing of this book, but it was important for him to put that out there. And the main purpose, I felt, for him putting that out there was so that other young black males who happen to identify as LGBT and add the letters, because I don't know what they all are, would know that there was somebody like them, which was another point of his storytelling. Was I want somebody to know. It was important to me when I finally found people who were like me. And he continually talks about that. And to withhold that from students, I have 2 daughters. Would I have withheld this from them? No, and I will tell you why. When my youngest child was in 5th grade, she picked up a book. And I looked at that book and I said, there's no way you're reading this. And I talked to a friend of mine who was also a reading instructor, and she explained to me, she goes, Angie, let her read it. If she finds it's too difficult or the subject matter is something she doesn't understand, she'll put it down, which she did. But we also had some conversations about that. And that is the other piece of that I feel is so important. Do I want my children, even though they're now grown, but when they lived with me, I wanted them to be able to ask me those questions. I wanted them to run into uncomfortable situations. I wanted to be there to guide them. And to me, that's my job as a parent. And I take that very seriously. I don't just sit on this board and just go yes or no at a whim. I seriously consider, if this were my child, what would I want it to be? And that's where I put my thought processes, as well as I have responsibilities as a parent. If my child is going to check this out of the library and they have questions, I'm hoping that I have taught them to come to me with those questions, or come to me and say, I don't like this book, or I don't know what to do with this book, or Mom, I don't think this is a good book for me. Okay, then we can have those conversations. That is my family. That is my right to say to my child, no, you're not reading this. But that is not my right to say to anyone else's children, no, you're not reading this. And I think we have to consider that as well. It is a difficult decision. I don't disagree with that. But I think you have to do what is best for your children, and consider, as we do on the board, when we look at these, what is in the best interest of the population as a whole.
Do you think it's important this be made available to 14-year-olds?
I think it's important that it be at the secondary high school level, and I think if a 14-year-old is to check that out, then I, as a parent, I would want to know. There are some 14-year-olds who I totally believe can handle that storyline.
Well, I agree with that.
There are some 14-year-olds who cannot.
Quiet from the crowd, please.
And
clear the room.
And as you also said, and I understand from the people in the gallery, you can't get it at the public library. It doesn't mean that I don't think that a 14-year-old can handle it. That's the individual 14-year-old.
What about the third?
Or 6th grade.
Guys, he's going to clear the room, and I'm going to support him on doing it. My question is, what about a 13-year-old? Are there any 13-year-olds out there that can handle this? Of course there are.
Yeah.
But are we going to provide it at the 13-year-old level? Or not?
But
so
I'm
what's
not-
magic about this? A few years ago, we had junior high. We had 8th grade and freshman in junior high and sophomore through senior at the high school. I can't prove this, but I'll bet you we wouldn't have had this in the library at the junior high, but we would have had it at the high school. So then the magic line was sophomore, and now the magic line is freshman. I'm simply saying, why wouldn't we? I don't want to sit here and fight with you, but some of the things you're saying is just, you can get it. You can get this stuff anywhere. Nobody wants it banned. It's all important. Kids need access to all kinds of information. But as a school district, we don't, it's my understanding 50 Shades of Grey is one of the books that is not allowed to come into school libraries. Is that correct? There's a reason for that.
I don't know. I'd have to go and look.
I think there's a reason for that, and I think we all agree with that. So what's different about adult heterosexual sex and this that's a minor with adults in this book that I think we all agree would be pretty high-rated movie or pretty strongly rated movie if it was a movie? What makes it different than it's a book? Is it that we're worried we're going to be called a name if we go out here with some kind of governance around this? Or is it just easier to say, just put it in the high school?
I don't consider this an easy decision by any stretch of the imagination.
But you're for it being in the high school.
I am.
And I think I can speak to one of Scott's questions on the front end as far as that selection process. Working with our library media services and librarians as far as selecting content at the elementary, middle, and the high school level. You know, rewind earlier in the fall when a list of 27 or so books were presented that people had concerns around as we were exploring those. We had about 12 of those that were identified. The others we did not have because in that selection criteria process, for whatever reason, those texts were elected to not be included in the library, or we weren't looking at those titles, right? So over the years, we've used that criteria as a judgment in referencing other library media resources, other providers that speak to reading level or the appropriateness of content to be able to place books on shelves. And so that's why that selection piece was covered at the study session. And that presentation's on board docs, and it speaks to our selection criteria process, but then also following that board policy. And that we feel, as an administration, in walking through that, and Dr. Westphal can chime in, that policy was followed pretty closely. Now, the question for the board moving forward is, do we revisit the policy at some point, look at other considerations or better ways of doing things? I know that as an administration, we've also kind of kept apprised of other districts and what their practices are. In the event that we can see a better way forward in some of those processes, perhaps we fold those into the policy considerations in the future. I don't know, Dr. Westphal, if there's anything you'd like to add.
Do you think that the consideration for what we do with any text that we include, if for one, I would love for you to know that we really do follow a fairly rigorous process for what we include based on recommendations from the various organizations that we look to. If they're not recommended or they're not in that age level that they are established by the publisher, we do not, I mean, that's one of the ways that we take things out. The other thing is that we really work very diligently to try to make sure that the audience that we're providing to is the proper audience. So we take really good care of that. In this case, where it's that crossing the line, where it's right on the edge, we really do ask the opinion of our constituency, and that's the committee. And while we may agree or disagree with the decision of the committee, and we did open conversation, so it was available. People were able to make commentary.
But they didn't.
But they did not. But we did open.
So nobody made comments and one person asked a question.
They did, we did. So we did follow the process, but we
Right.
did open it. That's my point.
And that's why I think there's two sides to this. Nobody's saying you didn't follow the process. And that's really important from a public schools, the way you manage any issue. is to make sure we're following board processes. And I am not saying that somebody didn't follow a process. I am saying that process needs to be changed and improved. And just because the process was followed doesn't mean we throw our hands up and say, well, we just let it in. I don't understand the pushback, other than it's just for expediency. I don't understand the pushback on thinking through what other gated criteria we could use here. Because what I'm hearing is, once this organization, whoever they are, says this book's good for high schools, we're just going to put it in.
It's not a singular group. So there are several associations that our librarians work through, right, to be able to determine that placement. And certainly there's varying opinions on that particular title or other titles, right? The other piece to that, I would say, from a parent perspective, and this is something we've worked on to, again, post, but then communicate in the future, is that ability for parents to assist in navigating that, putting those parameters in place. I know there are some other public parent resources. The most notable one that comes to mind for me is Common Sense Media, where a parent can enter a title of a movie or a book and be able to get their own, it brings up a summary, it brings up the age appropriateness of a particular work. That is another option to be able to communicate out to families. The difficulty there is it may not contain every title. And so it's a little hit and miss as it relates to that as a resource for families. There may be other resources that we're just not aware of, but that's something we could explore along with any revisions we feel need to be made to the policy.
I did want to add, Scott, one last thing is you can add restrictions. That is one of the current practices, and it is actually in our policy that that's a process that we can follow. So we are completely open to that, and that is part of what we present to the committee. So those are always options, and we do accept those from the committee, from the Board
Right,
of
so
Education.
the policy allows for all that, but my point again is the committee got together, didn't say a word, one person asked one question, and it was approved. So all those things are available in the process, but none of them were utilized.
So we did follow a whip around process where everyone was afforded the opportunity to share comments with the full group. You want to speak to that, Dr. Westphal?
That's exactly what we did. We gave everybody the opportunity to speak, and everyone did speak in each committee. So they all did bring, and they brought script, they brought comments, they brought information from their own reading or perspectives, and everyone did, in every committee that we've had, did share, and no one skipped.
Okay. I'm aware this is going to go 6-1. I get it. It's going to be in the library. That's just where we're headed. But my concern is that if we had a finance situation in front of us, and the audit and finance, we have an audit and finance committee in the district. If that district recommended something, I think we're a little more in touch with that committee than we are with others, because we appoint that committee. These people come in, they apply, we go through their background, what kind of audit, finance history do they have. We have an instructor from Jewel, I think maybe still sits on there. She's gone now. But we've got some really strong people on that finance committee because we see them. Now I'm being told is we pulled some people together and they also put in the library. Which is fine, again, followed the process, but that's kind of a sad process, and it feels very disconnected from us as board members saying there's a random 15 people out there that we're all going, oh, okay, let's just do this. I don't want this banned. Nobody wants this banned. I'm just arguing the appropriateness for certain ages, and I do not think it's appropriate for kids that are 14, 15 years old. And we have the ability to manage that if we choose to do it.
Well, and I think under the policy, the buck stops with us, right? So we've all had the ability to read it, and we're having dialogue about it, right? So regardless of a committee recommendation, I think we're all able to think through it, read it, recognize the worth of it or the uncomfortable moments of it. I don't think this is a comparison to 50 Shades of Grey. I think of it as a comparison to Elie Wiesel's Night, right, which is another memoir, which would be rated R if it was a movie, which has a number of uncomfortable situations from the Holocaust and what survivors take from that. And so, you know, where does that stop? And so that's my 2 cents on that. But the fact is I think we're all mostly on the same page in terms of where we're at with the content. I understand the concerns about the process, but that's why we get to read it and have this dialogue we're having right now.
Yeah, not to ignore your comments on the policy, Scott. I mean, we've obviously had numerous policies we've revisited over the last year or two, and I think this is another one that we'll put in there to say, hey, is this the right process we want to have going forward, and how do we maybe modify that to better serve?
I'll make one more comment, and then I'll shut up. But I'm 58. There are other people in here that may be around 54 and way younger. I'm aware, Nick. Don't remind me how much younger you are than me. The point is, when you're 58 years old, 50 years old, 40 years old, 10 years difference isn't that big of a deal. We're all adults. We're all kind of working the same process, same community. But when you're in school, there is a big difference between an 18-year-old and a 14-year-old. Think about when you were a freshman in high school, and maybe you practicing football against the seniors or basketball or whatever. There's a major difference in physical attributes and mental capabilities and cognition. I worry that we're not taking that into consideration. We're just saying because they're in that building, it's okay. I have concerns with that. And I think if we would do some kind of grading criteria at 17 plus or at juniors and seniors only, then now you have a vehicle that you can use going forward as other ones of these come up. And you're not stuck with the all or none approach. I'm looking for a little bit of compromise on it, as opposed to saying everybody gets it. But I've made my case, and we'll live with the...
I just think it's hard to have a bright line rule like that, because there are kids that can handle it.
But you already have that bright line rule.
Right?
You already have that bright line rule.
I've already got what?
You already have that bright line rule. You're not allowing 8th graders to get it, but you are allowing freshmen to get it.
Well,
it's just by building.
If your comparison is like, you know, a size, and you're talking about, you know, mental or emotional capacity, it's like, you've got freshmen and sophomores that can handle being on the football field with juniors and seniors.
Right.
I think you've got freshmen and sophomores that intellectually can handle reading materials that juniors and seniors can.
So have them opt into...
Why don't you have the parents, which they already can do, opt out?
Because the onus then is on them. It's around protection of the kids who aren't there yet.
But how do we pick everything? Do we say, well, if this was a screenplay, it would be R-rated? Well, then that would be the Bible. It would be R if it was word for word a screenplay. And I don't think anybody thinks that the Bible should be banned from certain ages.
Okay.
Anybody who's actually read the Bible would know that there are parts in there that would be R-rated if it was on a screen, word for word.
Old Testament's rough, but
I just don't think I don't think that that is the correct criterion.
So I understand where you're coming from. And I'm not sure that I...
It doesn't feel like anybody understands.
No, I understand where you're coming from, and I'm not sure that I disagree. However, I have a completely different perspective. And that is that I think kids have a First Amendment right to choose books in the school library. As a do.
You think they should?
Well,
this should be in the middle school library?
But the guidance that has been given to us is that there's appropriateness that comes with the book, and that's what we're choosing to use, those outside recommendations. I get that. Once it comes into our building and into our library, I think kids have a right to choose it. And I would say that there are some kids who, if a kid is seeking this book out, there's probably a reason. It probably speaks to them in some way.
And Mid-Continent would love to have them come in and
Let's hope they
get
can get
anything
there.
they want.
If they can get there, maybe they can't get there.
And I think for the criteria piece, there's that criteria on the front end, right, in that selection process, as we've talked about, that levels it, both from a reading perspective and subject matter. I think what Scott, if I'm hearing you correctly, is there another layer to that goes beyond that high school, middle level, elementary level, that then could be added as to your point, 14, 15 versus 16, 17.
And I'm just using, maybe I'm wrong.
And certainly assume that that's in place. If that structure is in place, then you're not just talking about a singular selection at this point. Now you're vetting all material from that lens, which could certainly be done. Right now the criteria is relegated to that elementary, that middle, and that high school level. We can certainly explore and see if there's something else out there that differentiates it further. I'm not aware of anything because so much of that work is done on the front end in that selection process, in looking at some of those associations that place material at the appropriate reading level and the appropriate content level, as far as like a ratings system, right? If there's something else that we can land on, we can certainly bring that up for discussion or inclusion in the policy as it relates to possible future restrictions.
Well, I'm rolling on. I would think this would, if we would at least consider it, it would give you options down the road. I'm not going to be here down the road. One more meeting and then Andy and I will sign off. But I just think it's worth at least considering and discussing more. And look, I'm no prude. I've raised 6 kids and none of them were delicate flowers. And we're all coming to this from our own experiences as parents and as seasoned board members in many cases here. So I respect the will of the board, but I'm just saying it's okay for all those ages in the high school. It doesn't make sense to me.
Do we have any way of gauging how often this book has been checked out? Do we have any determination on that? We do?
You can look at the catalog or the inventory and see how frequently it is checked out.
But we don't know that at this point.
I don't have that data for you, no.
So if we knew how many had checked it out, it also would tell us about who picks this book and how often it's been reviewed. And so I think that would be an indicator that this is, like you said, the book is challenging. It was challenging for me to read. But it's somebody's story, and it's somebody seeking out belonging, and there are others that can relate to that.
I agree with that. I truly agree with that. And I didn't think I would going into this process. I really didn't. But that doesn't mean it's automatically okay for everybody, in my opinion.
And isn't that where the parent comes in to be a part of that process?
Yes, but when I said that about masks a couple weeks ago, you said only if they're on an island.
So
which way you want to go with this? Parents get the choice here, but they don't get the choice there. I don't want to bring masks into this, but
you have.
It's funny how.
Other comments, questions, conversation?
Yeah, I think the parent, and seriously to answer AJ, though, I think the parents do get a choice in this. The question is which side of it. Is it opt-in or opt-out? I'd rather see parents opt their kids into this as opposed to not realizing it's even there and having to opt out.
But I think the counter to that would be there will likely always be titles that someone is wanting to restrict from their child, right? Whether it's texts that we are aware of or texts that come forward in the future.
Mm-hmm.
So then it's if you apply the opt-in one direction, it benefits or it sets this up. If you apply the opt-out, it sets this piece up. The opt-out provision, in terms of any titles within our inventory, whether it's a shelved book, a hard copy, or a digital copy, ends up really leaving it in the hands of the parent, irrespective of, well, this made the top 10 most controversial books list as compared to this title over here that may not even be on that particular list, but I have an opposition to or I have a concern about with my child.
But you can argue that both ways. I do not agree with that.
But what I'm saying is one is more broad-reaching as compared to the other in terms of that opt-in or opt-out provision. I think that's why that piece has been in place as far as parents being able to restrict to an extent all along. And then our thinking as an administration is that we need to ensure to communicate that to families at all levels, not just high school, at all levels, that you can put some filters in and around that as a family if that's something you would like to do. So that piece is there. If you change something moving forward from a policy standpoint, that's certainly up for discussion as we review the policy. So
Doing it your way, though, just forces the parents to have to know every little title and everyone to opt out of, and as opposed to giving them some more guidance around, there's kind of a section over here that we reserve for juniors and seniors. If you want to opt into it, you can. But as an organization, we're going to do our best to make sure that the appropriate reading materials go to the appropriate kids.
But Scott, while I understand what you're saying, I also think part of that responsibility falls to the parents. Teachers do an amazing amount of checking on kids, keeping an eye on kids, making sure they're doing what they should be doing. And
you don't want to put this on staff?
Do I want to put this on staff? No, I don't want to put it on staff, but I do want the point to be made that the teachers are doing a lot of work. Parents are part of that teaching team. I could not have, as a teacher, done everything I needed to do with the students in my classroom without the help of parents. And that was something I always wanted from my parents and hoped to get from my parents. And as a parent, on the flip side of that, I also felt that that was my job. And just
I
like
can argue the other side of that all day long.
And
I get it.
I agree. I understand. But my thought process is there are things as a parent that I think I should do, and there are things as a teacher I thought I needed to do. And then there are things as a board member that I feel are necessary for us to consider. But as a board member, I'm flying a little bit farther up in the air, and I'm not as in the weeds as I was as a parent and a teacher. Nor should I be, because that is not where I see myself as a board member. I do not need to be in classrooms. I do not need to be there for all the nitty-gritty. But what I do need to trust is that the people that we do put there are the ones who are looking out for our staff, for our students, for our families, for our community. And I feel like we did that in choosing the people that were and putting it to the committee to look at that book and bring us a decision first.
That's fine. I got it. The next committee is going to be a completely different 15 people, right?
Yes.
So it's going to be apples and oranges every time the book comes in. I'm trying to avoid that.
Well, and one of the adjustments would be the addition of students. We've talked about that and included some student voice in that as well to garner their participation, their perspective as well. So I think we would all agree it's invaluable to hear from students on a variety of topics, right? So how best can we do that as well and get that diversity of perspective?
Yep. I will say on video for anybody that's watching, my no vote does not mean I want to burn this book. Because that's what the other side all are going to talk about. And that's not what we just talked about here.
Additional question, conversation?
You want a motion?
I will take a motion if you so choose.
I move that the board affirm the decision of the Question Library Materials Committee to retain without restriction all Boys Aren't Blue in the Liberty Public Schools library collection at Liberty High School and Liberty North High School.
Second.
Sandra, when you are ready.
Scott?
No.
Andy?
Yes.
Kim Marie?
Yes.
AJ?
Yes.
Drew?
Yes.
Angie?
Yes.
Nick?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Item 5.02, Return to Learn Plan.
The next item, as far as the Return to Learn plan discussion, 5.02, I think we have some charts that we wanted to share with you this evening. Appreciate everyone's engagement, not only on the last item, but then certainly on this particular topic over the course of going on 2 years. It's hard to believe that in March, that will mark a 2-year anniversary, for lack of a better word, of the pandemic and decisions that were made back then in terms of the state of Missouri. These charts are pretty reflective of what we've experienced over the course of those 2 years, with really an emphasis, as we get into the second set, an emphasis on the month of January and February. So if we can blow those up a little bit in the back, I don't know if you can.
Yeah, I mean, it's just a page, so I mean, I can do the top, middle, like.
That's perfect. We can walk through them one at a time.
Okay.
The very top one doesn't go all the way back to March of 2020, but it does go back to the beginning of the school, the 2020-2021 school year, and you can see our data points. These are COVID cases, COVID positive cases per week from September of 2020 all the way to present. If you look at that peak toward the very right side of that particular chart, looks a little bit like a roller coaster ride, where you enter into the latter part of really November all the way through, and I believe this is updated through February 11th. Is that correct, Mr. Anderson? And so walking through that particular section from November to present, once you ended up at really kind of the midpoint in January, and then you started seeing a reduction in numbers. These are both student and adult cases, and then you've seen this drastic drop here over the course of the last couple weeks. If you go back to the month of December, when we were communicating with you what we were anticipating from the health department as far as Clay County having the recommended only language, Kansas City continuing to have the mask mandate in place, and the knowledge then that the mandate from Kansas City would sunset, we were preparing for a roll into the second semester, provided some talking points with where we are at. The one thing that was different then than is the case today is the reduction in case counts. We've made a tremendous improvement from December to present. And so that's where we are this evening as we kind of walk through these other charts. If you'll scroll up to the next one. The next one is indicative of case counts per week as far as that 7-day incidence rate and what we have been tracking. This is straight from Clay County and the data that they are reporting. One caveat that I would note, a distinction between the previous chart and this one. The previous chart is our data that we believe, we're pretty confident in, that we're able to really review that on a daily basis. There are a couple of key metrics that we look at daily. That is positive cases among students and adults, our attendance rate, as well as our staffing levels. As compared to some of the data that comes at us from Clay County that's listed on their dashboard, which typically has a lag of about a week or two. And so the first chart shows that dramatic decline, whereas other charts that you may see, whether it's this evening on the Clay County dashboard, may have a week lag or may not show that dramatic decline. So the second chart is the Clay County cases per week. We're seeing that reduction as well. The third one is, this is the Liberty Public Schools total COVID-19 cases per week, again, carried all the way through to present. That is for the 2021-2022 school year only, and you can see that dramatic drop reflected in that as well. The next three charts then bring us to some of our real-time metrics that we are able to monitor. And this is something that we feel moving forward we will be able to continue to assess, not just in and around COVID cases, but other possible contagious diseases. You know, we typically monitor the flu, we monitor measles outbreaks, we've done that a couple years in the past, but anything else similarly, these are some of those metrics that we feel are invaluable to us. One is the positive cases. You can see the dramatic decline over the course of the last several weeks, reflecting where we were almost to the tune of that higher number, close to 250 on any given day, almost to single digits as to where we are presently. That's moving in the right direction. The second piece, as we talked about earlier in some of our earlier conversations, was the teacher subfill rate and staffing levels. This particular metric, you actually want the measure to move up in the chart because you want it to be closest to 100 as you possibly can be. You can see by some of the low points in and around the middle of January, there were some days where we had difficulty filling subs in classrooms to the tune of about 60% fill rates. Fortunately, the board put a provision in there earlier in the month of December to allow our teachers to be able to cover for one another and to be remunerated. So even on those days where you had a sub-fill rate of closer to 60%, 100% of our classes were covered. It's just that we didn't have to outsource and have enough substitutes through Kelly Services to cover that load. Instead, we prioritized what classes were covered, classified teacher positions as compared to support staff positions, And then we cover the remaining courses or classes or sections with our available LPS employees or teachers. That third category below is another one that we follow in terms of a metric. And this particular indicator, you want that number to be in the single digits. On any given day in Liberty Public Schools, we typically hover in and around 94 to 96% attendance rate. It varies ever so slightly. Once you get to the secondary level, it's typically a little bit lower than the elementary level. You can see at its peak, again, going back to the middle of January, latter part of January, we had some days where we were pushing 88% attendance rate. And then we could certainly disaggregate that by building. We're back to our typical days where we're floating anywhere from 4 to 5 to 6% low in terms of an overall 94% or so attendance rate as a school district, and then we can certainly disaggregate that further in taking a look at our individual buildings. Couple this information with what we've heard in the sense that the City of Kansas City is moving toward allowing their current mask mandate to sunset, and the fact that the Clay County Public Health Services guidance for schools currently reflects masks recommended, not required. We're recommending to the Board of Education that we allow for the mask mandate to sunset, to then align with both the Health Department guidance from Clay County as well as the City of Kansas City, with our intent moving forward to continue to monitor and report out updates to the Board of Education as we continue to move forward. Reflected in the board packet this evening is an amended return to learn plan. We've done this several times. The primary change is moving away from the term required to recommended to align with our continued health department guidelines among both health departments. And there were some minor items that we felt needed to be cleaned up as well. You want to speak to those, Mr. Anderson, real quickly?
Sure. The other items are really mainly reflective of dates that were in there about if you wanted to pivot to a different learning model. That's still obviously an option for folks, but there were specific dates included in the other plan. And then we also had in the previous plan a chart that included a lot of guidance in around symptoms and testing and returning back to school or work. We decided, since that fluctuates, that we just will simply refer to what the current standing public health guidance is and remove it from the plan since it does fluctuate from time to time.
This absence rate, this is all absences for all reasons, or just specifically COVID?
That is correct. That is all. That's a great point. That could be anything. That could be a parent that calls in bereavement because of a family funeral. It might be COVID related, but it's not singularly COVID related. And so, as has been the case in previous years prior to this pandemic, when we would monitor things like the flu, that's probably the next biggest example that we can think of where there's a high percentage of attendance or absences. We would watch that similarly. Anytime you're getting close to that 88 and below category, either by building or as a district, that's cause for alarm. Not just among students, but then also that staffing level we saw earlier.
Is there I think if we would drop this mask mandate, there's no 7 people on the planet that'll be happier than the 7 people sitting up here. Because nobody wants them. Nobody likes them. Doesn't matter what side of the argument you're on, nobody likes these things. My question on this motion, though, is why do we need to wait for the mayor of Kansas City to say he's dropping his mandate before we just saw the numbers? Let's just drop it.
So then, going back to the policy conversation we've had, and this is the charge of the administration to effectuate board policy, and we've shared this, so it's no secret or surprise in the effort to follow health department guidelines. That's as simple as I can make it. I can also say that has served us relatively well, even over the course of this last month and a half. It could be attributed to a lot of different things. I don't know that we'll ever truly know. But at the same time, as we have watched other districts struggle, we feel, both from providing educational opportunities, fully seated 5 days a week, virtual, hybrid, everything in between, as well as the effort to try to maintain our classes and schools open, I would say that adhering to that board policy has been the path forward for us as an administration that has helped us maintain some of those pieces. And certainly difference of opinions. We get that. We've learned a lot over the course
It's
of the
4
last 2
days,
years.
but Clay County.
It's one day.
I thought it was 18th.
Pardon?
It is.
It's the end of the day on the 17th, that Thursday, to
I
take
like when-
effect that 18th. So
Well,
when
I
our
mean,
students
when it is-
return,
We're all going to get
Yeah.
there, and everybody's going to be happy Friday.
when our students return on that following Tuesday after the President's Day weekend, that's when that would take effect from a student standpoint. From the adults that are here on Friday working, that's when it would take effect on Friday.
And Clay County's on board with this already.
Clay County guidance already is aligned for recommended only. That school guidance is already in place.
So
That's correct.
I mean, because one of the things I've been vocal about is we're following Clay County guidance.
Both health departments is what we've adhered to, yeah.
Any public transit still remains mass, right, with federal mandate?
And that is a great point. Within the federal provision, that federal requirement for school transportation still remains in place. We've heard speculatively over the course of the last several days that there's some conversation at the federal level as to when that might sunset. That's really all we know. We're hearing bits and pieces, but we don't have any definitive date for that going away at the federal level. I don't know if you have anything else to add, Mr. Anderson. I would chalk that up to rumor until we hear something more concrete from the federal level.
And I would assume at that time we would follow whatever the federal changes and update.
That's
plan
correct.
accordingly.
That's correct. There may be another iteration of that once that plays out, as far as amending our plan as well.
Any additional questions, comments, conversation?
In the anticipation of the Kansas City, Missouri Mass Requirement Ordinance expiring February 17, 2022, I move the board adopt the Return to Learn Plan, third addendum, effective February 18, 2022.
Second.
Second. Oh.
Sandra, when you're ready.
It was very quiet.
Sorry.
Scott?
Sorry.
Yes.
Andy?
Yes.
Kim Marie?
Yes.
AJ?
Yes.
Drew?
Yes.
Angie?
Yes.
Nick?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Into new business, 6.01, board policy revisions.
You have 3 items that are presented to you this evening. These are shared for first read solely this month, and they're board policy DCV entitled Political Campaigns, KKB related to audio and visual recordings, JHDE entitled Behavioral Risk Assessments. Those 3 are presented to you this evening for first read. If you have questions, suggestions, comments, please let us know over the course of the next couple of weeks. Otherwise, these will be brought forward for your consideration at the regular monthly meeting in this coming month of March.
2 of them being a result of state laws, right?
Correct. Yeah.
Into 6.02, contracts, purchases, bids.
We do have several items we wanted to make you aware of, so we'll turn that over to Mr. Anderson to walk us through 6.02 this evening.
Thank you. There are 2 items. The first is with respect to a contract with a vendor, Excellence K-12. I referred to in my report that is part of the master planning process that we're bringing in a firm to do survey work to the community. So this would be the group that we would recommend to you all. And just as a point of reference, we have a long-standing relationship with Patron Insight. They're no longer taking business, and so this is actually somebody who had worked with that firm for a long time. So it's very consistent with the work that we've done in the past, which I think we've been fairly pleased with. We did interview 2 firms, and our selection was to recommend Excellence K-12, and it would be for a 1-year term with the option to renew for 2 additional 1-year terms. And seeking approval tonight so we can move forward with as part of the planning schedule.
Was it, I just have to ask, was this an employee of the company that's no longer doing it? They spun off their own company?
So there were 2 primary partners. One had passed away.
Okay.
And then this is the individual who obviously did not pass away. He branched out and started his own firm.
Gotcha. Okay.
Any questions on Excellence K-12 with Lexington Plumbing? Emergency purchase.
I move the board approve the contract with Excellence K-12 and the services of Lexington Plumbing.
Second.
Sandra, when you're ready.
Scott?
Yes.
Andy,
Yes.
Kim Marie,
Yes.
AJ,
Yes.
Drew,
Yes.
Angie,
Yes.
Nick,
Yes.
motion carries.
Moving into 6.03, the technology device selection.
I'm going to also turn this one over to Mr. Anderson to walk through with us this evening.
Thank you. We provided a Friday update a few weeks ago on this one. Just really wanted to send kudos to our tech department. They pursued a grant opportunity. We were successful in obtaining that grant, the amount of $2.1 million as part of the Emergency Connectify Fund. It was a qualifying event, obviously, since we didn't receive approval for it. What we did as part of the application process, thought we could use those funds to replenish our devices 2 years ahead of schedule. There's been a pretty significant upgrade of the device, so it allowed us to do that effectively as it washes out at no cost once we sell our used devices. So it was really a great opportunity to have that $2.1 million to leverage and get ahead of our lease expiration date and to update devices throughout the entirety of the district. And that would just be the Mac Pro or the MacBook Airbooks. So with that, I can't take any questions.
So it's the 5.9 million is the total amount.
Right.
2.1 is the grant. Is that 2.1? I'm looking at the schedule. Is that a part of payment number one? Is that what all that grant is going towards? Is that right,
Yeah.
Ms. Sullivan? Okay. And then the remainder we feel like we're going to make back when we sell the current devices. Okay.
And any concern in and around supply chains as it
Well,
relates to
as
this?
far as no, we expect to have them here within the next month or so.
We're not going to sell the devices before we have the new devices anyways,
No,
right?
sir.
Making sure.
Why are we doing this on first read again? $6 million.
Yeah, I think the primary reason was, again, almost every dealing we've had with Apple, they kind of have, here's the offer, here's the deal, if you want to procure and secure it now. We've done this before with them. We tried to do the Friday update as a way to give you a little bit more lead time. Typically, we don't like to rush these things. This does allow us to kind of lock that in and move it forward.
And what, we got that in Jan 14 update? Is that right on Friday, somewhere in there?
Yeah.
I think that's right.
I move the board adopt the resolution authorizing and approving the execution and delivery of a master lease purchase agreement with Apple Inc. and approving the execution and delivery of Schedule Number 3 to the master lease purchase agreement.
Second.
Sandra, when you're ready?
Scott,
Yes.
Andy,
Yes.
Kim Marie,
Yes.
AJ,
Yes.
Drew,
Yes.
Angie,
Yes.
Nick,
Yes.
motion carries.
Into 6.04, the revised compensation schedule.
This next one, Dr. Vogelar, I'll turn it over to you.
Yes, so this is on for first read action next month, but this involves the restructuring of positions or staffing set for fiscal year 23, so July 1 start, but we want to be able to post this position. This is a coordinator of digital communications, a support position for our director of communications, and it's just responsive to the changing demands of a district our size and a community of our size in terms of the work of the communications department. So it's on there for first consideration. Its placement is the byproduct of of an evaluation, a classification evaluation, which includes internal and external equity analysis on the position, and then landing places where we feel it's a good market range on the professional technical salary schedule for such a position. We'd like to post this at the end of February with hopefully an opportunity to fill this at either the March or April board meetings for a ready start in July.
So the only change on the schedule is truly adding that particular position, right?
That's correct, into column L of the professional technical schedule. This is the 20-80-hour schedule, so the 12-month position.
Okay. Any additional questions? Getting coming back.
Again, presented for first read.
Yep. Thank you.
Perfect. 6.05.
This is the reluctant item, but with Sandra Cochran's pending retirement at the end of this month, we want to bring forward a consideration for the board as far as appointment of board secretary. As we've shared, and as you are familiar, you know Denise Aldrich, in working with the district for a number of years in support of several of our operations department, most notably overseeing, working with the Department of Operations with Chief Operations Officer Steve Anderson, as well as with the Finance Department with our Chief Finance Officer Cindy Sullivan. We've done cross-training over the course of the last several years, leaning on Denise from time to time to assist in covering off study sessions as well as regular monthly board meetings. She knows board docs front and backward, in that she's very responsible for a lot of the consent agenda items that you see, as well as the contracts and bids and purchases that appear on a regular basis from time to time with our Board of Education. So we would put forward Denise Aldridge for consideration for the appointment of Board of Education Secretary.
I move the board approve Denise Aldrich as Board of Education Secretary effective March 1st, 2022.
Second.
Sandra, you want to have us vote on your replacement?
Well, when you put it that way.
Denise hasn't teared up yet.
There's give her time. Scott?
Yes.
Andy?
Yes.
Kim Marie?
Yes.
AJ?
Yes.
Drew?
Yes.
Angie?
Yes.
Nick?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Into Board of Education section, starting with legislation and advocacy. Angie, anything?
The forum is coming up on March the 7th. It is at Capitol Plaza in Jefferson City. I hope somebody can go. I will be in Phoenix, Arizona. So not available. And there are, if you're watching any of the MSBA emails that come across, there are quite a few pieces of legislation pertaining to education that are working their way through a variety of committees, and some much quicker than others. And so if you are so inclined to contact your elected officials regarding that, please feel free to do so.
Thank you. 7.02 upcoming meetings. You all will see the next study session bright and early the 1st of March, followed by March's board meeting in March 22nd. Moving into board remarks.
Well, I would just like to say thank you to the Warren Hills Troublemakers and Liberty High School's orchestra, who both did amazing jobs at the Music Educators Association meeting. Kim Marie and I went, and it was a 6-hour drive, topped off with tacos. But I will tell you, it was so worth it to listen to the music that came from those two groups. They were amazing. And then secondly, and I'll let you say whatever else you want to say, congratulations to Brian Hartman, who is now the MMEA President-elect. I think I got all the letters in there.
And he's a teacher at Liberty North.
And as a teacher at Liberty North.
Right.
And I wasn't able to be there, but I know, so we've got Mr. Brian Hartman, who's the president. I know Kale Sukup was an award recipient. I believe her husband was as well. So Liberty was well represented, and kudos to all those folks.
And just a quick thank you. Anthony and I have one meeting left that we're kicked out, but and I don't know that we'll have any more really awesome discussions like we had tonight. But I do want to thank the board for being willing to have these open discussions, to discuss in front of the public, to make sure people understand where we're at on certain issues, and even when we don't agree, I still love you guys.
Even me. Well, I'll be being treated differently. Even me.
So, thank you.
Sandra, I didn't have the platform to speak earlier, but I've been on the board the least amount of time, but I can certainly say you've been so welcoming, and it's been a pleasure to get to know you, and it's one of those things that we're very excited for Denise to join us in that role, but you'll be missed, and I just want to thank you for all you've done for the district.
Thank you.
Sandra, I too was going to chime in on the quality of service and support that you've given me throughout my terms on the board, and you're just an excellent person in terms of being supportive, and you're always there and available. The second thing I'd like to say is related to us going through this COVID period. I think it's been a result of hard work by leadership in making decisions. Being able to keep our schools open and our students in class has been done as a result of creativity, meeting challenges, and I think we know it was not easy, but truly I do think that our administrators and leadership should be thanked for the effort and how they've been engaged in making a difference here.
I just have one more comment for Sandra, and you know I can't say very much because I will cry. Enjoy your retirement. It is well earned. Thank you.
I feel like I'm losing a partner.
What's that? I know.
Like we're losing a partner.
I know.
She's so professional and knowledgeable, and thank you.
Well, and while you may be retiring from this job, I am excited to see what you choose to continue to do, because I don't think your heart and your service to whatever you choose is done. It just happens to be done here. And best of wishes. And so I suppose with that, one final board doc entry for you as we look to adjourn.
Wow.
Do I have a motion?
I move the board adjourn.
Second.
Sandra, when you are ready.
Scott Connor.
Yes, ma'am.
Andy Rothman.
Yes.
Kim Marie Graham.
Yes.
AJ Bird.
Yes.
Drew Marriott.
Yes.
Angie Reed.
Yes.
Nick Bartlett.
Yes.
We're adjourned.